What kind of daughter changes the locks on her own mother's office, then smiles like she is doing a favor? The new key would not turn. Ruth stood outside the storage yard office with her coffee cooling in one hand and a paper notice taped to the glass in front of her. Her name was gone. After 30 years of opening that door before sunrise, she had become a visitor on the land she and her late husband had built from dust, debt, and stubborn hope. Celine stepped out from behind the desk, wearing Ruth's old office badge on her blouse. Mom, please do not make this ugly. Ruth looked past her daughter and saw Victor near the file cabinets, sliding one drawer shut a little too fast. Something in his face was not concern. It was fear. Then Celine said the words that made Ruth's knees weaken. You can stay in the house for now, but the business is no longer yours to run. And Ruth finally understood that the locks were only the beginning. Ruth did not answer right away. She set the cold coffee on the counter with such care that even Celine looked at it as if the cup might break the silence before she did. The office had never seemed small to her before. It had been a place of keys and receipts, of people leaning over the counter with tired faces and honest problems. Now it felt staged. Her chair had been pushed back from the desk. A cardboard box sat open near the wall. Her sweater lay inside it. Her reading glasses, old receipt stamp, and a framed photograph of Celine and Grant, as children, had been placed on top like items from an estate sale. Who packed my things? Celine looked at Victor before she answered. It was just to clear space. That was not my question. Victor moved closer, wearing the calm face he used whenever he wanted people to believe he was the reasonable one. Ruth, nobody is throwing anything away. This is a transition, not an eviction. The word transition slid across the counter like something greasy. If it is not an eviction, why does it look like one? Celine pressed her lips together. Because you refuse to see any change as help. Help does not need a new lock. Victor sighed softly. We changed the locks because too many old keys were floating around. It was a security issue. My key did not float. It lived in my pocket. Mom, please. Ruth looked toward the file cabinets. A new lock bar had been drilled across the front, cutting through the gray metal Walter had painted years before. Those cabinets had held leases, late notes, tax papers, and promises made to tenants who needed one more week. She pulled the top drawer. It opened an inch and stopped. When did this happen? Celine folded her arms. Last night. You let someone drill into your father's cabinets at night? Celine's face tightened. Dad is gone. The words were true. That was what made them cruel. Ruth stood very still. Victor was watching her, waiting for tears, waiting for confusion, waiting for any weakness he could call proof. She faced them both. Show me the paper I signed. Victor put his hand on a leather folder beside the computer. We can have a copy sent to you. I asked to see it. Celine spoke quickly. You signed it last Tuesday, at your kitchen table. I remember where I sat. I want to read what you put in front of me. Victor's smile faded at the edges. It is standard management language. Then standard language should survive being read. For a moment, nobody moved. Outside the window, a pickup truck rolled slowly past the front gate. Mr. Alvarez from Unit 46 lifted a hand, then lowered it when he saw them standing like strangers around the counter. Celine finally reached for the folder. Victor, give it to her. He did, but he held the pages a breath too long. Ruth noticed. She had worked in county records for more than 30 years. She had watched people guard paper because paper could speak against them. Ruth laid the document flat. The words were crowded and cold. Temporary operational authority, banking coordination, vendor management, lease administration, record access, business continuity. Her signature waited at the bottom of the third page, familiar and suddenly foolish. She remembered that afternoon, Celine bringing soup, Victor spreading pages on Ruth's kitchen table, Celine saying, Mom, this only lets me help if the bank or insurance office needs me. Ruth had been tired. Her knees had ached. She had trusted the hand that pointed to the line. Now she read each sentence twice. This does not make you owner. Celine drew herself up. It gives me authority to manage the business, temporary authority for operations. Operations are not the same as ownership. Victor placed both palms on the counter. Ruth, nobody said ownership changed this morning. Then why am I locked out? Celine's voice rose. Because every time anyone tries to talk about the future, you turn it into a memorial for Dad. Ruth looked at her. The hurt arrived first. Then came the old guilt every parent carries. She kept her voice level. Your father built this place so you and your brother would always have something solid under you. Celine laughed once without joy. No, Dad built this place because he loved being needed, and you loved being the only person who knew how everything worked. Victor touched Celine's elbow. Celine. She pulled away from him. No, she should hear it. Grant became the hired hand, and I became the ungrateful daughter because I wanted a life that did not smell like dust and old boxes. Ruth absorbed the words in silence. Some were unfair, some were not. That was the trouble with family pain. It rarely arrived clean. I am sorry you felt that way. Celine blinked, as if apology was not what she had prepared to fight. Ruth continued. But pain does not give you the right to change the locks. The office phone rang. Ruth reached first because her body still belonged to 30 years of habit. Mercer's Safe Keep Storage. This is Ruth. A woman's voice trembled through the receiver. Ruth, it is Elaine Parks. I got a letter saying my rent is going way up. I thought we were settled until winter. Ruth turned slowly towards Celine. What letter, Elaine? The one with that new company name? It says I have to agree by next month. Ruth, my husband's flag is in that unit. His tools, too. I cannot move them right now. Ruth watched Victor's face. It did not change. Celine's did. Elaine, do not move anything today. Do not sign anything today. I will call you back with a clear answer. So it was not from you? Ruth swallowed. No, not from me. Elaine began to cry softly. I knew you would have told me first. Ruth hung up and listened to the office settle around the damage. Celine spoke first. Some rents are far below market. Elaine buried her husband last fall. That cannot decide the future of the company. No, but it should decide whether you send a letter that scares her without one phone call. Victor stepped in. Sentiment is not a business plan. Ruth turned on him. Neither is cruelty. It only looks profitable from far away. The front bell jingled. Mr. Alvarez stepped in with his cap in one hand and a folded check in the other. I can come back. Ruth straightened. No, you are here during office hours. Celine came around the counter too quickly. I can help you. Mr. Alvarez hesitated. That small pause told the room where trust still lived. Celine saw it. Her face hardened. We are moving tenants toward electronic payments soon. My wife writes the checks, he said. She likes paper receipts. Ruth said gently, give him the receipt the way we always do. Celine turned sharply. You do not get to override me in front of customers. Ruth met her eyes. I did not embarrass him. You did. Mr. Alvarez folded the check back into his palm. I will wait outside. He left before anyone could stop him. Celine's voice shook. Do you see what you are doing? Ruth looked at the empty spot where Mr. Alvarez had stood. Yes, I am watching you turn decent people into problems. Victor checked his watch. We have a representative coming this afternoon. This office needs to be calm. Ruth heard the word representative and felt the morning sharpen. What representative? Celine looked away. A business advisor. Victor said at the same time, a property consultant. The mismatch sat between them. Ruth folded the signed document and slid it into the pocket of her cardigan. Victor reached for it. That needs to stay here. Ruth stepped back. It has my name on it. It is a company document. Then your company should have made a copy before it locked me outside. Celine came closer, lowering her voice. Mom, please give it back. Are you asking or are you taking? Celine stopped. For the first time that morning, she looked frightened of what she had become. Victor did not. He looked irritated that Celine had paused. The computer gave a soft chime. Celine turned toward it, but Victor moved first, leaning over the mouse and clicking through the camera screen to open the front gate for a delivery van. Ruth watched his hand. How long have you had that password? Victor straightened. I have helped before. No. You have stood in this office before. That is different. Celine snapped. Stop treating him like a criminal. I am treating him like a man who knows too much about a system he claims not to run. A delivery driver entered with a long flat box. Delivery for Safekeep Property Management. Ruth felt Celine go still. The driver looked around. Need a signature. Celine signed with a tight smile and sent him out. Ruth walked to the box and tore the tape before Victor could move it. Inside was a metal sign wrapped in clear plastic. She peeled back one corner. Safe Keep Property Management. No Mercer, no family owned, no motto Walter had painted by hand, just a clean new name for an old betrayal. When were you going to tell me? Celine's eyes filled again. After the review. What review? Victor said, It is preliminary. Ruth looked at him. Preliminary to what? Neither of them answered. That answer was enough. Ruth picked up her purse from the chair where it had been moved and walked to the door. Celine followed. Where are you going? To make copies. Mom, to call Nora Bell. Victor's face tightened at the name. Nora had worked beside Ruth at the county office for years and could read a document the way some people read weather. Celine said, This does not need to become legal. Ruth looked back. It became legal when you put my signature in a trap. She stepped outside before her daughter could speak again. The heat hit her face. The gravel yard stretched ahead in rows of faded doors. The business still breathed around Ruth, ordinary and unaware. Mr. Alvarez waited beside his truck. Miss Ruth, she walked to him, hold your check until tomorrow. He frowned. Is something wrong? Yes. He nodded slowly. I have rented here a long time. People stay because of you, not because of metal signs. Ruth almost lost her strength then. Kindness was dangerous when a person had been holding herself together with pride. Thank you. A golf cart rattled from the far lane. Grant drove it with one hand, a toolbox bouncing on the floorboard. He slowed when he saw her. Mama? Grant climbed out, already looking toward the office. Celine called me. She said you were upset. Did she say she changed the clocks? His face went blank. What? And the password. And the file cabinets. And she has someone coming this afternoon to discuss the property. Grant looked toward the office. Celine stood inside the window with Victor behind her. She did not tell me that. Did Pamela? His eyes came back to Ruth. Pam said Victor was helping Celine get papers together. I thought it was just more talk. When did she say that? Last night. Ruth held still. Last night. The locks had been changed last night. Her things had been packed last night. The sign had been ordered before the morning ever began. Grant saw her face. Mama, what is this? Ruth pulled the folded document from her pocket. This is what they say I signed. Do you trust it? No. He took a breath. What do you need? The question steadied her. A copier that is not in that office. The old one in the maintenance room still works if you curse at it politely. They walked across the gravel together. Behind them, the office door opened. Celine called, Grant, do not get in the middle of this. He stopped. The old command had power. Ruth saw it reach him. Then he looked at his mother. I think I already am. Celine said nothing. In the maintenance room, dust floated in the warm air. Grant plugged in the old copier and waited while it groaned awake. Ruth placed the pages under the lid. The first copy came out pale. The second was clear. She made 3 sets. Nora will know what this means, Grant said. Yes. And if Celine has more, then we find that too. Ruth gave him 1 set and folded another into her purse. The last copy she held in her hand, because holding paper felt better than holding only fear. Tires crunched outside. Grant looked through the narrow window. A black sedan just pulled in. Ruth moved beside him. A man in a pale shirt stepped from the car with a tablet under his arm. Victor came out to greet him before he reached the office door. Celine followed, smoothing the badge on her blouse. The representative had arrived early. Grant's voice lowered. Do you want me to go out there? Ruth watched Victor shake the stranger's hand. No, not yet. Celine glanced toward the maintenance room, then hurried across the gravel. Mom, please come back inside. Ruth stepped out into the sunlight. Why? Because this is not the time. Ruth looked at the man with the tablet, then at the sign box visible through the office window. No, Celine, this is exactly the time. Celine's face trembled between anger and pleading. Please do not make a scene. Ruth walked past her toward the office door. I did not bring the scene. I found it waiting for me with a changed lock. Victor's smile tightened as Ruth approached. Ruth, this meeting is not for you. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the sweat at his temple. This business is. Celine stepped between them, her voice low and desperate. Mom, you can stay in the house for now, but the business is no longer yours to run. The words struck Ruth harder because Celine said them in front of a stranger. The man with the tablet looked down at his shoes. Grant stood beside Ruth with one hand on his toolbox. Victor watched from behind Celine, still and patient, as if waiting for the old woman to finally become the problem he had already described. Ruth did not break. She looked at her daughter and wondered when Celine had learned to use mercy like a leash. You can stay in the house for now, as if the little home behind the office was a favor, as if Walter's boots had not stood by that back door until the day after his funeral. I heard you. Celine swallowed. Then, please go home. Ruth turned to the man with the tablet. Sir, whatever you came here to discuss, understand this clearly. I have not agreed to sell, transfer, or surrender this property. Victor stepped forward. Ruth is emotional today. Ruth did not look at him. I am also present today. The representative glanced at Victor. Maybe I should come back another time. Celine's panic showed at once. No, please. We can still walk the property. Victor guided the man toward the office with a hand at his back. Give us a moment. Celine stayed in the gravel, breathing too fast. Mom, you are making this impossible. No, I am making it witnessed. Why do you want to humiliate me? Ruth took one slow step closer. I wanted to trust you. You changed the locks. For a second, Celine looked young and frightened. Then she turned away and followed Victor inside. Grant let out a breath. What now? Ruth touched the copies in her purse. Now I go home. You just told her you would not. I said I would go when I chose to. I choose to go there before anyone thinks to take these papers. Grant nodded. I will walk with you. No. Stay close to the office. Listen without looking like you are listening. Mama. Victor is more careful when you are nearby. Grant looked toward the office window. Victor was already speaking to the representative with both hands, while Celine stood stiffly beside the counter. Grant's voice lowered. I should have paid attention sooner. Ruth touched his arm. Pay attention now. She walked away before tenderness could slow her. The little house behind the storage yard sat in the shade of an old desert willow. Ruth unlocked the kitchen door with a key that still worked, and the ordinary click almost undid her. Inside, the air smelled of lemon soap and old wood. Walter's hat still hung on the peg near the pantry. No one had boxed that yet. Ruth spread the copied pages across the kitchen table and read them again. Temporary operational authority, account coordination, vendor oversight, permission to review records, permission to speak with banks and service providers. It was strong enough to cause damage. It was not strong enough to erase her. At least, that was what she believed. Belief was not enough. She opened the address book beside the phone and found Nora Bell's number. Nora answered on the fourth ring. Ruth Mercer, if this is about church raffle tickets, I already bought enough to wallpaper my hallway. Ruth closed her eyes at the familiar voice. Nora, I need you to read a document. The humor vanished. What kind? One, my daughter says, lets her run the business. Did you sign it? Yes. Did you know what it was? I knew what they told me it was. Nora sighed. That is never the same thing. Bring it over. I cannot leave. There is a property man at the office. Looking how? With a tablet and a clean shirt. That sounds expensive. I will come to you. Nora, you do not have to. Yes, I do. Put on coffee if your hands still remember how. Ruth hung up and started the coffee maker. While it hissed and sputtered, she watched the yard from the kitchen window. Victor and the representative stood near the first row. Celine nodded too often. Grant lingered near the soda machine, pretending to sort tools. Victor glanced toward the house. Ruth stepped away from the window. Nora arrived less than 20 minutes later with a canvas bag, full enough to frighten a dishonest lawyer. She washed her hands at the sink, put on her reading glasses, and sat without asking. Tell me the facts first. Save the heartbreak for after the nouns and verbs. Ruth gave her the document. Celine and Victor brought it last Tuesday. They said it was for insurance, taxes, and emergency access. This morning, the locks were changed. The computer password was changed. The file cabinets were locked. My things were in a box. A representative came early. Tenants received rate letters under a new company name. Nora read without looking up. What company name? Safe Keep Property Management. Nora's mouth tightened. They are dressing the place for outsiders. That is what it felt like. Nora turned the page, then went back to the first. She made a small sound through her nose. This is aggressive. How aggressive? It gives Celine operational control in too many places. Bank communication, vendor review, tenant notices, record access. She can make plenty of noise and do plenty of damage. Ruth held the edge of the table. But it does not give her the right to sell the land. Not by itself. It does not transfer ownership. It does not remove you as a principal. It does not let her put you out of the house without a separate process. And it gives Victor nothing except what Celine lets him touch. Ruth felt air enter her lungs more fully than it had all morning. Nora raised one finger. Do not relax. Bad paper can still hurt honest people when they answer it too late. I know. You need a lawyer. I needed you first. Nora softened, but only for a breath. What else feels wrong? Ruth looked toward the window. Victor knew the new computer password. He opened the gate from the screen faster than Celine could. His phone rang, and he hid the name. Whose name? Ruth hesitated. Pamela, Grant's Pamela, yes. Nora did not react much. That was one reason Ruth trusted her. Keep that in your pocket for now. Do not build a house on one strange brick. A quick knock came at the kitchen door. Grant opened it and leaned in. Mr. Otis Reed is outside the shed. He says he needs to talk to you, but not near the office. Nora put the document into her bag. Then we should hear him. They found Otis in the narrow shade beside the pump shed, one hand on the door of his old truck. He was a retired mechanic with a bent back, sun-browned hands, and 3 units full of tools he always promised to sort. His cap was pulled low. Miss Ruth, I do not want trouble. Ruth stopped in front of him. People who start with that usually found some. Otis rubbed his jaw. I seen Mr. Victor out here late. Grant's face changed. When? More than once. Past couple months, maybe longer. I come by odd hours because Sleep and I do not get along anymore. Sometimes I sit in my truck and listen to ball games. Gate opens after dark, and here he comes. Ruth kept her voice gentle. Was Celine with him? Not usually. Grant asked, which units? Sometimes the office, sometimes the back row, unit 31 once. Maybe 32. Hard to tell from where I was parked. Ruth felt Nora go still beside her. Why did you not tell me? Otis looked ashamed. Figured he was family. Figured maybe you knew. Then last week I saw him with a man I did not know, walking the fence line with one of those measuring wheels. That did not sit right. Nora asked, do you remember the day? Tuesday evening. Same day the trash truck came late and blocked me in. Grant muttered Tuesday. Ruth looked at him. The day I signed. Otis reached into his truck and pulled out a small spiral notebook with an oil-stained cover. I keep my own gate notes. Started after my nephew borrowed my truck and blamed me for being here after hours. I write when I enter and leave. Sometimes I write who else I see. He handed it to Ruth. Dates, filled the pages in careful block letters. Notes were short and plain. Victor at gate after dark. Black truck near back row, man with clipboard, office light on late. Ruth closed the notebook with both hands. I do not know what it means, Otis said. Neither do I yet. But she did know one thing. Victor had been moving through the yard when he thought no one important was looking. Nora asked to copy the notebook pages. Otis agreed, then climbed back into his truck and drove off slowly, as if worried the gravel itself might repeat what he had said. Grant watched him go. What do we do with that? Nora answered. We line it up with paper. Ruth looked at the office. Victor and the representative were walking near the first row. Celine kept glancing back toward the house. I need vendor files, Nora said. The cabinets are locked. Walter kept backups. Ruth almost smiled despite herself. Walter kept paper the way some people keep canned peaches. Grant nodded toward the pump shed. There are old boxes in there. They searched under Nora's direction. Dust rose in the warm shed. Grant lifted boxes from high shelves while Ruth read labels, gate manuals, roof repairs, county permits, old leases, insurance, vendor paid, vendor unpaid. Nora pointed. Those. They carried 2 boxes into Ruth's kitchen and spread folders across the table. For a while, the world narrowed to paper, dust, and the scratch of Nora's pen. At first, the invoices looked ordinary. Gravel delivery, door spring repairs, security camera maintenance, fence patching, pest control, gate service. Then Grant picked up one sheet and frowned. This is wrong. Ruth turned. He laid the invoice on the table. North Gate motor replacement. The vendor name meant nothing to Ruth. Desert Line Maintenance. The amount printed beside the work description was large enough to make her throat tighten, though she did not say it aloud. Grant tapped the date. I repaired that motor myself. Ruth looked at him. You are sure? Mama, I remember because Pamela's sister was visiting and I missed dinner. The motor was not dead. The chain slipped and bent a bracket. I welded it, reset the sensor, and changed the rollers. We did not replace the motor. Nora pulled the invoice closer. It says emergency replacement, parts, labor, and disposal. No outside company came. Ruth sat down because her knees did not trust her. Maybe Celine paid the wrong bill by mistake. Nora looked at her with compassion that did not allow foolishness. Ruth, I know. Grant was already flipping through more papers. Here is another one from the same company. South camera upgrade. He looked toward the yard. That camera still has the old cracked housing. I complained about it last month. Nora pulled a notepad from her bag. Dates. Vendors. Work claimed. Work actually done. We make a list. Ruth stared at the first invoice. Paid. The stamp across it was not her handwriting. When did Celine start paying these? Nora checked the folder. Some are older than last Tuesday. How could she? These may not have gone through only her. Grant placed another invoice beside the first. Fence reinforcement. Ruth whispered, Otis brought those posts. And I put them in, Grant said. Nobody billed us for that. Nobody honest. The old refrigerator hummed. Outside, a truck backed up with a distant beep. Normal sounds continued while something ugly opened on Ruth's table. The house phone rang. Ruth picked it up. Celine's voice came through tight and low. Mom, the representative is leaving. You need to stop making everyone uncomfortable. Ruth looked at the invoices. Is everyone uncomfortable? This is not funny. No, it is not. Celine exhaled. Victor says if you keep interfering, we may need to document your behavior. There it was. Not locks now, not passwords, behavior. Ruth felt the old humiliation rise, hot and choking. They would call her emotional, confused, difficult. They would dress cruelty and concern until outsiders nodded along. Then Nora tapped the gate motor invoice. Ruth's spine straightened. She said, Tell Victor I am documenting too. Celine went silent. Mom, what does that mean? It means I am reading. Ruth hung up before love could make her explain. Grant stared at her with fear and pride mixed together. Nora placed the signed document on one side of the table and the invoices on the other. Between them lay Otis's notebook, open to the Tuesday entry. The room felt different with the papers arranged that way, less like a kitchen, more like the beginning of a reckoning. Ruth looked at the fake gate motor invoice again, then at Grant. You fixed that yourself. Yes. And the business paid someone else as if they had done it. Yes. Nora's voice was quiet, firm, and terrible. Somebody has been stealing from your business, and they were counting on you being too heartbroken to look. Ruth did not move after Nora said it. The kitchen table seemed to widen between them, covered with invoices, copied pages, and the small notebook Otis had carried like an old man's uneasy conscience. Grant stood with his hands braced on the chair back. His face had gone pale under the dust from the pump shed. He kept staring at the gate motor invoice, as if the paper might change if he looked long enough. I fixed that motor with my own hands. Ruth heard the hurt under his anger. It was not only about the bill, it was about someone using his labor, his silence, and his loyalty as cover. Nora slid the invoice into a clean folder. Then we start with proof, not feelings, not guesses. Proof. Grant lifted his head. There may be camera backups. Ruth looked at him. Where Dad made me set up an old drive after the break-in years ago. The main system records over itself, but the backup sometimes keeps clips longer. It is in the maintenance room. Nora closed her bag. Then we go now. They crossed the yard while the afternoon light flattened against the metal doors. The office windows reflected the sky, hiding Celine and Victor inside. Ruth felt watched anyway. Victor came out before they reached the maintenance room. Where are you going? Grant did not stop, checking equipment. Victor's voice sharpened. What equipment? The kind that breaks when people who do not understand this place start touching things. Ruth saw Victor's jaw tighten. Nora stepped between them with a calm that was almost cheerful. Victor, if you have something useful to say, write it down. We are collecting paper today. His eyes moved to Nora's bag. You have no authority here. Nora smiled. I am not the one who needs to prove that. Grant opened the maintenance room door and waited for Ruth. She stepped inside and Nora followed. Grant shut the door before Victor could look past them. The room was hot and smelled of old rubber, oil, and dust. Grant removed a loose panel beneath the breaker box and pulled out a small black drive sealed in a plastic bag. Ruth touched the edge of it. Walter knew this was there. Dad said thieves check drawers, not bad wiring. Grant connected the drive to the old desktop. The machine started with a tired hum. Folder names appeared slowly. Back row, office side door, front gate, Unit 31. Nora leaned closer, opened the night Otis mentioned. Grant clicked through several files. The first clips showed empty gravel under security lights. Then Victor's truck entered the gate after dark. Ruth felt the room tighten around her. The footage was grainy, but Victor's walk was clear. Another man stepped from the truck carrying a long case. They walked the fence line, stopped near the back row, and pointed toward the road beyond the property. Nora wrote the time in her notebook. Grant opened another clip. Victor left 20 minutes later. No repair truck came. No work lights turned on. Nothing about the visit matched any invoice on Ruth's table. Grant clicked through more folders. Victor at the side office door. Victor near the gate. Victor carrying papers after closing. Victor looking straight toward one camera, then moving into a blind spot. Ruth whispered, he knew where not to stand. Grant's mouth hardened. He watched Dad and me adjust those cameras for years. Nora said, keep going. Grant opened the folder from the night before the locks were changed. The office side light glowed. Victor's truck sat near the back row. Celine's car was not visible. Grant frowned. Pamela said she was going to her sister's house. Ruth's chest tightened before she knew why. Grant. He clicked the next file. A silver car entered close to midnight. It rolled slowly past the office and stopped near Unit 31. A woman stepped out, her hair pulled back, one hand smoothing the front of her sweater. Grant stopped breathing. No. Victor came from the shadow near the unit. The woman turned toward him. For a second, they only stood close together. Ruth's heart began making bargains with the screen. Maybe it was about papers. Maybe it was a family errand. Maybe grief and suspicion had made everything look darker than it was. Then Victor reached for her. Pamela Mercer lifted her face and he kissed her. Grant's hand slipped from the mouse. The clip kept playing until Nora reached over and paused it. Pamela's face froze in grainy light, half turned toward the camera, clear enough to remove mercy. Nobody spoke. The old computer hummed. Somewhere outside, a unit door rattled in the wind. Ruth looked at her son and saw a boy again, holding something broken that she could not fix. Grant stepped back. How long? Nora's voice was careful. We do not know. He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. She told me I was making her lonely because I came here too much. She said this place got the best of me. Ruth closed her eyes. The words sounded too much like Celine's. The yard had become everyone's excuse, everyone's wound, everyone's weapon. Grant reached for the mouse again. Nora caught his wrist. You do not have to watch more. Yes, I do. He opened the next clip. Pamela and Victor stood near the same unit, speaking close. Victor gave her an envelope. She put it in her purse. Then they walked toward the office side door. Victor used a key. The camera cut off as they entered. Grant stared at the empty screen. Ruth forced herself to speak, take the drive out. He shook his head. There may be more, and there will be time for more, after your heart is not doing the thinking. He looked at her, wounded by the gentleness. Do not mother me right now. The words hurt, but Ruth accepted them. Pain needed somewhere to stand. Nora removed the drive and placed it in her bag. We keep this safe. Grant looked toward the door. I am going home. Ruth moved between him and the door. Not like this. She is my wife. And right now she is part of something you do not understand. I understand enough. Nora said, you understand what you saw. That is not the same as understanding what they planned. Grant's face twisted. You want me to sit here and sort invoices while my wife lies in my house? No, Ruth said. I want you to stay the kind of man who can look at himself tomorrow. His breathing slowed, but only a little. I will not hurt anyone. I believe you, then move. Ruth held his eyes for one more second, then stepped aside. Grant left the maintenance room. Ruth followed him outside, but he was already crossing the gravel toward his truck. Celine stepped from the office doorway. Grant, what is wrong? He did not answer. He did not even look at her. Victor came out behind Celine, and Ruth saw the smallest flicker cross his face when he watched Grant drive away. Not worry. Calculation. Celine turned to Ruth. What happened? Ruth could have told her. She could have opened the whole rotten thing in the hot yard and let Victor stand there under it. But Celine still looked certain of her own sacrifice, so Ruth knew the truth would slide off her unless it was held by proof. Ask your husband. Victor moved beside Celine. It means your mother is trying to divide us. Ruth looked at him and felt something inside her go quiet. No, Victor, I think you have done that work yourself. Nora touched Ruth's elbow. House, now. Inside the house, Nora copied the drive while Ruth sat at the kitchen table. The invoices waited in their folders. The signed document lay beside them. Otis's notebook sat open to the night Victor had walked the fence line. Celine came in without knocking, flushed and trembling. Mom, why did Grant leave like that? Ruth did not answer. Celine looked at the folders. What are you two doing? Nora closed her bag. Reading. Celine swallowed. Victor says if you keep interfering, we may need to document your behavior. Ruth rose. Did you hear that from your husband? Or did you make it ugly all by yourself? Celine's eyes filled. You do not know what it is like living with a man who looks at you like you are one more problem he cannot afford. Ruth went still. What problem, Celine? Money, pressure, calls. I do not know all of it. What calls? I said I do not know. Celine backed toward the door. What is wrong is that you will not let go. She left and shut the door. Nora said, she knows less than he does, but more than she is saying. Outside, evening settled over the storage yard. Nora left after placing the copy drive and the invoice folder in a tote bag under Ruth's sink. Do not keep everything in one place. Do not confront Victor alone. Do not let Celine cry you out of reading. Ruth nodded. After Nora left, the house felt too quiet. Ruth sat in Walter's chair, hearing Grant say Pamela had gone to her sister's and seeing Pamela on that screen, turning her face up to Victor in the dark. Across town, Grant sat in his truck outside his own house long after the engine went silent. The porch light was on. Pamela always left it on when she wanted the house to look welcoming. The curtains were drawn. Behind them, a lamp gave the living room a warm yellow glow, the kind that had once made Grant feel lucky after a long day repairing doors. He got out and walked in without using the doorbell because it was his house too, at least until the truth finished walking through it. Pamela came from the hallway in a blue sweater. Grant, where have you been? Celine called here twice. He shut the door. Where were you last night? Her face changed just enough. I told you. Linda's house. Say that again. Why? Because I want to hear how it sounds now. Grant, what happened? He stepped into the living room. Wedding photos stood on the side table. Their smiling faces looked younger and kinder than either of them felt. The storage camera saw you. Pamela's lips parted. The room went very still. He waited for denial. She did not offer it. What did you see? That question was worse than a lie. Grant nodded slowly. So there is more than one answer. She sat down as if her legs had weakened. Grant. How long? A few months. He turned away, then turned back because leaving the room would be too easy. With Victor, tears filled her eyes. Yes, say it like you chose it. She shook her head. I did not mean for it to become this. You did not mean for it to be recorded. That is not fair. Do not ask me for fairness while I am still trying to breathe. She pressed both hands to her chest. I was lonely. So was I. You had the yard. I had responsibilities. You had your mother, your father's ghost, broken gates, tenants. Everyone needed you except me. Grant flinched because the words had truth in them, and truth inside betrayal still cuts. You could have told me you were unhappy. I did. No, you sighed. You went quiet. You made me guess and punished me for guessing wrong. Pamela looked toward the kitchen. Victor listened. Of course he did. Listening is cheap when a man wants something. She wiped her face. He said there would be a sale. Grant's body went cold. What sale? I do not know details. What did he promise you? She stood and walked to the window, though the curtains were closed. He said after the property changed hands, he could leave cleanly. He said Celine would have money, your mother would be taken care of, and we could start over somewhere no one knew us. Grant stared at her back. We. Pamela closed her eyes. I was foolish. No foolish is buying the wrong paint. This was a plan. She turned. He said everyone would be better off, and you believed a man cheating on his wife with his wife's brother's wife. The sentence filled the room with its own ugliness. Pamela covered her face. Please stop. I have barely started. Grant, I am sorry. He looked at the wedding photo again. No, you are cornered. She reached for him. He stepped back. Do not. Her hand fell. I do not have anywhere to go tonight. He thought of Ruth standing outside her own office. Stay in the house for now. For now. The cruelty echoed. You had somewhere to go last night. Pamela sank onto the couch. He walked to the door, then stopped. Did Celine know about you and Victor? No. The answer came too fast, but he believed it. Did she know about the money problems? Pamela hesitated. Some. What money problems? Calls, loans, things Victor said were temporary. He said Celine was helping him fix everything. Grant opened the door. Pack what you need before morning. I cannot look at you in this house tonight. Where are you going? He did not answer. He drove through dark streets without choosing a destination. Once he pulled into an empty grocery store lot and sat with his forehead against the steering wheel until the first wave of shaking passed. He did not scream. He did not call Victor. He did not call Celine. He had always been slow to anger, and now that slowness saved him from becoming useful to the people who had betrayed him. Near dawn, he drove back to the storage yard. The gate was closed, and the security lights still burned. The office was dark. The new sign was hidden inside. The rows of doors stood quiet, holding other people's lives while his own lay open and scattered. Ruth was on the back porch before he reached the steps. She wore her robe and held a cup of coffee she had not touched. She looked as if she had been listening for his truck all night. Grant stopped at the bottom stair. The words would not come at first. His throat worked around them and failed. Ruth set the cup down. He looked at his mother with a grief too large for anger. Mama, this is worse than money. Ruth reached for him before he could climb the steps, but Grant only stood there, one hand on the rail, looking like the night had taken something from him and left the body standing. Then we handle worse, she said. He shook his head. You do not know what she told me. Ruth knew he meant Pamela, but she did not ask for the words yet. Some truths needed a chair, a cup of water, and silence before they could be spoken without tearing the throat. She opened the screen door and led him into the kitchen, where the paper still waited beneath the weak yellow light. The invoices, the copied agreement, Otis's notebook, and Nora's clean folders covered the table like pieces of a broken family mirror. Grant sat down slowly. She admitted it. Ruth stood beside the sink. The first light of morning had not yet reached the window. Outside, the storage yard lights made pale squares on the gravel with Victor. He nodded once. She said he promised there would be a sale. She said after the property changed hands, he could leave cleanly. Ruth closed her eyes. Celine's voice from the day before returned to her. A clean start, less stress, money to settle everything, maybe a place closer to the coast. The same lie had been poured into two different women, shaped to fit each hunger. Grant covered his face with both hands. I keep thinking about Dad. Ruth turned. Why? Because he watched Victor closer than any of us. I thought he was just old-fashioned. I thought he did not like him because Victor wore nice shoes to a gravel yard. A tired smile almost touched Ruth's mouth, then vanished. Your father did hate those shoes. Grant lowered his hands. But maybe he saw something. Ruth looked toward the hallway, toward the small bedroom that had become more museum than room since Walter died. His shirts still hung in the closet. His old work jacket still smelled faintly of dust and sun. If Ruth pressed her face into the collar, his toolbox sat under the bench in the back room because no one had wanted to move it. She whispered, maybe he did. Grant followed her gaze. What? Ruth did not answer. She walked to the back room and turned on the lamp. The light spilled over boxes, folded tarps, old paint cans, and Walter's red metal toolbox. She knelt slowly, her knees protesting, and ran her palm over the dented lid. Walter had kept everything useful, bent screws, spare keys, rubber washers, receipts for things long dead. Ruth used to scold him for turning every drawer into a hiding place. He would grin and say, someday, Ruthie, one of my messes will save you a trip. Grant stood behind her. Mama? She opened the toolbox. The smell of oil and metal rose like a memory. Wrenches lay in their places, a roll of tape, a pair of gloves stiff with old work. In the top tray, under a folded rag, Ruth found a small brass key on a faded tag. Personal receipts. Her hand froze. Grant crouched beside her. What does it open? Ruth closed her fingers around the key. I think your father is about to tell us. They crossed the yard just as dawn softened the edges of the storage doors. The office was still dark. Victor's truck was gone. Celine's car was not there. The place looked innocent in the morning quiet, as if it had not spent the last day helping people lie. Ruth led Grant to the back row, past Unit 31, where the camera had shown what Grant had never deserved to see. He did not look at the door. Ruth did, only long enough to feel the bitterness rise and settle. Walter had rented Unit 49 to himself years ago, though he never called it that. He called it overflow, then later personal receipts, always with a look that made Ruth roll her eyes. It was a narrow unit at the far end, shaded by a leaning wall and rarely opened. The brass key slid into the lock. For one frightening second, Ruth thought it would not turn. Then it clicked. The door groaned upward. Dust drifted in the early light. Inside were file boxes stacked on wooden pallets, a folded workbench, two old lamps, and a metal chair with one torn arm. Everything had Walter's order beneath his clutter. Dates were written on masking tape. Folders were tied with string. A coffee can held keys, each labeled in his thick handwriting. Ruth stepped inside. Grant waited at the threshold. You okay? No. He nodded, accepting the honest answer. They carried the first three boxes to the house. By then, the sun had risen enough to warm the kitchen window. Ruth made coffee nobody drank. Grant opened the box labeled recent changes. Nora arrived 15 minutes later, hair pinned badly, eyes sharp. You found Walter's stash. Ruth handed her the brass key. I found his worry. They began reading. Walter's notes were plain, practical, and devastating. He had written dates, vendor names, who entered the yard, what work had truly been done, and what invoice arrived later. He had copied checks, circled payments, and taped small notes to receipts. Gate motor build, Grant repaired bracket only, south camera upgrade build, housing still cracked, fence posts build, Otis brought posts, Grant installed, vendor phone number answers only after business hours, ask Ruth after taxes, do not upset Celine without proof. That last line made Ruth sit back. Nora read it twice. He was protecting you. Ruth stared at Walter's handwriting. He was keeping it from me. Those can be the same thing when a man is scared and foolish. Grant rubbed his eyes. Dad knew. He suspected, Nora said. Suspecting is not the same as knowing. That is why he kept paper. Ruth opened another folder. Inside were bank statements copied by hand because Walter had never trusted printers to behave when needed. Several payments to Desert Line maintenance were highlighted. Another vendor appeared again and again. Dry Creek Site Services. The handwriting beside it read, No truck seen on dates billed. Nora arranged the papers by date. This goes back before Celine's document. Ruth's voice was low. How far? Far enough that yesterday was not the beginning. Grant looked toward the yard. Victor has been in our office for years. Family is how some people get past locks, Nora said. Ruth lifted a smaller envelope from the bottom of the box. It had her name on it. Ruthie read, Only if they rush you. The kitchen went silent. Grant looked away, giving her privacy she did not feel ready to accept. Nora folded her hands and waited. Ruth opened the envelope carefully, afraid the paper might tear. Walter's handwriting filled one page. Ruthie, if you are reading this, then I was too slow or too stubborn to say it right. I do not trust Victor with the business. I do not like how he asks about land value and then pretends it was a joke. I do not like invoices that show up for work Grant already did. I do not like the way Celine hears him before she hears herself. Ruth pressed her hand to her mouth. The letter continued. I did not want to turn you against your own daughter. Maybe I am wrong. I hope I am. But hope is not a lock and love is not a ledger. So I filed an amendment with Nora's old office contact. You hold controlling authority over any full sale of Mercer Safekeep. No management paper, family vote, or temporary assignment can sell the land without your direct signature in front of an independent witness. If anyone tells you otherwise, slow the room down and read every line. Ruth could not see the rest for a moment. Grant whispered, Mama. She wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand and forced herself to continue. There is a second copy in this unit and one filed off-site. I should have told you. I know that. I was afraid if I said it out loud, it would make trouble real. Forgive an old fool for trying to protect you with paper when I should have trusted you with truth. She lowered the page. Nora reached into the folder and found a stapled copy with a county filing stamp on the upper corner. The stamp was faint, but the date was clear enough for her to lean closer and nod. He did not just draft it, he filed it. Ruth touched the stamp with two fingers. When? Nora read the date aloud, then glanced at Grant after the first set of strange invoices. Before Walter went into the hospital, Grant sank back into his chair. He was carrying this alone while we were arguing about whether he should see another doctor. Ruth's eyes closed. She remembered Walter refusing to complain, sitting at this very table with a blanket over his knees, telling her he was only tired. She remembered Victor arriving with soup and a question about land values, and Walter's hand tightening around his spoon. He tried to tell me once, Ruth said. Nora looked up. What did he say? He said, if anyone tries to make the yard sound simple, ask what they need hidden. I told him not to be dramatic. Grant bowed his head. Dad was not dramatic. He was just early. Ruth took that sentence into herself and let it sit there. Early. Walter had been early to suspicion, early to protection, early to the place none of them had wanted to reach. Nora exhaled slowly. Well, Ruth looked at her. Is it real? If Walter filed it the way he says, yes. We need the filed copy, but this is not a love note dressed as law. This is specific. Grant stood abruptly and walked to the sink. He gripped the edge, head bowed. Ruth folded the letter against her chest. For the first time since the locks had refused her key, she did not feel only trapped. She felt accompanied. Walter had not walked in from the back row with a wrench in his hand, as Celine had mocked, but he had left a tool. Paper. A lock made of words. The house phone rang. All three of them looked at it. Ruth answered. Celine's voice was brittle. Mom, we need to meet at the office in 1 hour. Ruth kept her eyes on Walter's letter. For what? The representative wants to clarify the next steps. Victor says it will be better if you are there, so nobody can say we excluded you. Nora leaned forward slightly. Ruth said, who else will be there? Victor, me, the representative. Maybe one of their legal people by phone. Ruth heard the effort in Celine's voice. She was trying to sound professional, but fear pressed through the edges. And Grant? Celine hesitated. If he can behave. Grant turned from the sink, eyes hard. Ruth said, Grant will be there. Mom, this is not about his marriage. The sentence confirmed too much. Ruth's voice cooled. Then stop letting married people make business decisions in the dark. Celine went silent. Be at the office in 1 hour, she said, and hung up. Grant stared at the phone. She knows something happened. She knows Victor is nervous, Nora said. That may be all. Ruth laid Walter's letter on the table and smoothed it once. Nora began gathering the amendment copy, the invoices, Otis's notes, and the printed, still from the camera footage where Victor stood by the office side door. She did not include the image of Pamela and Victor kissing. Not yet. Grant noticed. Why not that one? Nora looked at him gently. Because if you drop all the pain at once, people stop seeing facts and start watching blood. Grant's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Ruth went to the bedroom and changed into the navy dress she wore to bank meetings and funerals. She pinned her hair, then opened Walter's closet. His work jacket hung inside, faded at the elbows. She touched the sleeve, but did not take it down. I found your paper, she whispered. The silence answered in the only way it could. When she returned to the kitchen, Grant had washed his face. Nora had packed her bag. The documents lay in order. Ruth picked up Walter's letter and read the line again. If they try to rush you, Ruth, slow the room down and read every line. Her daughter was waiting in the office. Victor was waiting too. A stranger wanted next steps. Everyone expected Ruth to arrive wounded, confused, or begging for a private talk with Celine before matters went too far. She folded the letter and placed it in her purse beside the brass key. Then she looked at Grant and Nora. I am not begging my daughter in private. Grant stood straighter. Nora gave a single nod. Ruth turned toward the front door, toward the office that had been taken from her for one long day and one longer night. I am going to that meeting. Grant opened the door before Ruth could touch the knob, and the office looked smaller than it had ever looked. Celine stood near the counter with her arms folded tightly. Victor was beside the desk, clean shirt pressed, leather folder closed under his palm. The property representative sat in Ruth's chair, then rose quickly when she entered. A phone lay in the middle of the counter, its speaker light glowing with someone waiting on the line. Ruth looked at the box of her things, now pushed beneath the side table, half hidden like a mistake. Nora walked in behind her and placed her bag on the counter. Before anyone speaks about next steps, I want every name in this room and on that phone. Victor smiled. Nora, this is a private family matter. No, Ruth said. It stopped being private when strangers came to measure what was mine. Celine tried to sound steady. Mom, we asked you here so no one can say you were excluded. Ruth pulled the copied management paper from her purse. You excluded me first. Now you want me visible enough to be blamed. Celine flinched. Victor leaned forward. That is unfair. Celine has been trying to protect this business from years of sentimental mismanagement. Grant stepped toward him. Say one more word about my mother like that. Ruth lifted her hand. Nora opened the first folder. This paper gives Celine limited temporary authority over operations. It does not give her authority to sell the land. It does not remove Ruth Mercer from ownership. It does not give Victor Walker any authorities unless Celine granted it under her temporary role. Victor laughed under his breath. You are not an attorney. No, Nora said. I am a reader. That has been enough to frighten men like you for years. The man on the phone said, if there is disagreement over authority, we should postpone. Victor's smile disappeared. There is no disagreement. Ruth is emotional. Ruth looked at the phone. I am not emotional enough to sign anything. The room went quiet. Celine whispered, Nobody is asking you to sign today. Ruth turned to her. Then why the new sign? Celine's eyes moved toward the metal panel leaning behind the cabinet. Safe keep property management. Clean, silver, empty. I thought it would help the business look serious. You thought removing our name would make it serious. Victor tapped the folder. Branding is not theft. Grant said, Neither is kissing my wife on a security camera, but you found a way to make that business too. Celine turned so fast the badge clipped to her blouse swung against her chest. What? Victor's face hardened. Grant is angry about his marriage. It has nothing to do with this discussion. Grant's voice shook, but he did not raise it. You brought Pamela into this yard after midnight. You used with her by Unit 31. Celine looked at Victor. Tell me he is lying. Victor did not speak. Nora placed one printed still face down on the counter. I have the footage copied and stored. We do not need to show it unless someone wants to deny the date or the gate entry. Celine stared at the paper as if it might burn through the counter. Victor? He spread his hands. This is exactly what they want. They are trying to turn you against me. Celine sat down slowly. Nora opened another folder. Now the invoices. Victor took one step toward the door. Grant moved into his path. You can listen. Nora laid out the papers one by one. Gate motor replacement billed to Desert Line maintenance. Grant repaired a bent bracket himself. Camera upgrade billed to the same vendor. The old camera housing remained cracked. Fence reinforcement billed to Dry Creek Site Services. Posts were brought by Otis Reed and installed by Grant. Multiple payments were marked complete for work no outside vendor performed. The representative looked at Victor. Were these vendors provided by your office? Victor's voice went cold. Old businesses have messy records. Ruth said old businesses have memories. Nora placed Otis's notebook on the counter and witnesses. The man on the phone spoke quickly. We are not party to any internal accounting matters. Nora leaned toward the phone. You may be party to receiving information from someone who did not have lawful authority to sell. Then the advisor said, we acted through a holdings contact. Celine looked up. What holdings contact? Victor snapped, this is not relevant. Ruth's heart slowed. There it was, the flinch before the door opened. Nora removed a printout from her bag. I asked a friend to check public business filings early this morning. The buyer group approached through a limited company. One registered agent links to a financing office Victor used to list as his mailing address. Victor's face changed. Celine stood. What does that mean? Nora did not look away from Victor. It means the person pushing your mother to sell may also be standing near the people trying to buy. The representative picked up his tablet. I was not made aware of that connection. Victor pointed at Nora. You are making accusations you cannot support. Ruth reached into her purse and took out Walter's filed amendment. Then support this. She placed it on the desk, smoothing it with both hands. My husband filed this before he died. It says I hold controlling authority over any full sale of Mercer Safekeep storage. No temporary manager, no family vote, and no rushed meeting can sell this land without my direct signature before an independent witness. Celine stared at the filing stamp. Victor reached for the paper. Ruth put her hand over it. No. For the first time, Victor lost the smoothness in his voice. That old paper changes nothing. Nora said, it changes everything. The representative moved away from the desk. I believe my company should withdraw from today's discussion. Victor turned on him. You were told this could close quickly. Celine whispered, close. The representative looked trapped. I was told the family approval was being finalized. Ruth looked at Celine. Were you told that too? Celine's mouth trembled. He said once you saw the number, you would stop fighting. What number? Victor cut in. A fair one. Nora opened another paper. Below comparable land value. Below enough to make a reasonable seller ask who benefits. The representative gathered his tablet. Mrs. Mercer, I will send all materials our office received to me, Ruth said. Yes, and to Nora. He nodded. When the representative left, the office felt stripped bare. Only Ruth, Grant, Nora, Celine, and Victor remained, surrounded by paper. Celine turned to her husband. You were going to sell it to people connected to you. Victor's answer was too slow. I was trying to secure a future. For who? For us. Celine's laugh broke in the middle. You mean for you and Pamela? Victor's face hardened. Grant stepped forward, but Ruth touched his sleeve. Victor said, Pamela understood what none of you would. This place has eaten all of you. I was the only one willing to do something about it. Ruth looked at him calmly. You were willing to steal. He leaned toward her. You call everything stealing because you cannot admit the world moved on without Walter? Celine slapped him. The sound cracked through the office. Victor stared at her, shocked less by the pain than by the fact that she had stopped obeying his temperature. Celine lowered her hand, shaking. Do not say his name. Victor's eyes went flat. You think your mother will save you now? Celine's face crumpled, but she did not step back. No, I think she already tried, and I helped you hurt her. Victor turned toward the door. Grant blocked him again. You are not taking anything from this office. Victor smiled. Careful, Grant. Grant held his ground. I have been careful my whole life. It did not protect my wife, my mother, or my sister from you. Nora picked up her phone. I have an attorney waiting for my call. I also have copies stored off-site. Leave now, Victor. Leave with your hands empty. Victor looked around the office. He walked out. Through the window, Ruth watched him cross the gravel. Grant followed him outside and stood in the lane until the truck disappeared onto the road. Celine sank into the customer chair. I thought if the sale happened, the pressure would stop. Ruth stayed behind the counter. What pressure? Celine stared at her hands. Calls. Depths. Victor saying we were drowning. He said he had made mistakes, but he could fix them if I helped him move the business forward. He said you would never understand because you wanted everything frozen in Dad's memory. Celine looked up through tears. I hated this place because I thought it took you both from me. Then I let him use that hatred. Ruth's face softened, but her voice stayed steady. You could have told me. I was ashamed. You chose to make me ashamed instead. Celine covered her mouth. I am sorry. I believe you. Celine looked at her with sudden hope. Ruth shook her head gently. But sorry cannot unlock what you locked. Not today. Grant returned and stood by the door. His eyes were red, but his voice was controlled. Pamela wants to come get her things from the house. Not alone, Nora said. Grant nodded. She will not be alone. Ruth looked at him. You do not have to be strong every minute. He gave a tired, sad smile. I am not strong. I am just refusing to be useful to them. The locksmith came before noon. He was a heavy man with kind eyes who had once rented Unit 12 during a divorce and remembered Ruth letting him pay late without a fee. He changed the office lock again. This time, Ruth received the first key. Celine stood near the counter watching. Ruth held the key in her palm. You will not have one. Celine closed her eyes. I know. Not to the office. Not to the files. Not to the bank. Not until a lawyer tells me what is safe. By afternoon, Nora had tenant letters spread across the counter. These must be corrected immediately. Ruth called Elaine Parks first. Elaine, it is Ruth. The letter you received was sent in error. Your unit is safe. Your rate will not change this month, and no one will touch your husband's things. Then Ruth called Mr. Alvarez. Yes, paper checks are still welcome. After she hung up, Celine sat down with the tenant list. Let me call the rest. Ruth studied her. Why? Because I helped scare them. Ruth handed her the list, but not the master copy. Celine took the phone with both hands. Mercer Safe Keep Storage. This is Celine. I am calling about a notice sent in error. Late in the day, Grant carried the new metal sign to Unit 31. Ruth followed him halfway down the lane, then stopped. The open unit was empty and dim. Grant leaned the sign against the back wall without ceremony. Want it destroyed? Not yet. Why keep it? Ruth looked at the silver letters. Because some mistakes should be stored where we can remember what they tried to replace. Grant shut the unit door. Weeks did not heal the family. They only revealed the size of the wound. Victor's accounts were frozen. The attorney found enough in the invoices to keep him busy and afraid. The buyer group sent a formal letter claiming confusion and vanished from Ruth's world. Pamela left Grant's house with 2 suitcases and no speech that could make betrayal sound lonely enough to excuse. Ruth changed the business rules. Grant remained in charge of maintenance, but he logged every hour and every part. Nora became the unofficial guardian of any document longer than a grocery list. Otis Reed received free coffee for life, though he complained the coffee had never been good. One cool morning, Ruth opened the gate before sunrise. The old sign stood near the road, freshly cleaned but not repainted. Mercer Safe Keep Storage, family owned. Walter's motto still sat beneath it, uneven and stubborn. Inside the office, Ruth placed the brass key beside Walter's photograph. His letter was locked in the drawer, not hidden from her anymore, but kept safe. Grant came in with 2 coffees. Morning, Mama. Morning. He looked around the office. It feels like yours again. Ruth watched the first sunlight touch the rows of storage doors. For years, she had thought ownership meant holding on for the people you loved. Now she knew it also meant knowing when to let a person stand outside a locked door until they learned why keys matter. No, she said softly. It feels like mine for the first time.